Begin by cultivating dragons right now. In the Lancer kingdom of the Anda Empire, the story opens. This woman was a teacher, and she was teaching her students that they could feel magic as long as they could concentrate. However, this man was not having any of it. He was stuck here teaching these kids the very fundamentals of magic. The primary character in this tale is named Lin Lane. For the past 8 years, he has been forced to study magic at the preschool level. Children of his age are already proficient in basic magic. He was unable to sense the magic molecules around him in his situation. However, Lin must grow to the level of a sage mage in order to discover the truth about anything. He cannot afford to leave things as they are. He was struck by something while he was deep in meditation. The child then turned to Lin right away and apologized, saying he had become very excited about performing magic. However, the fact is that he did that on purpose. Because Lin is a noble and cannot use magic, the child was making fun of him. Then, in an attempt to irritate Lin, these kids dubbed him a street kid and an orphan. Since nobility in this planet were meant to possess strong and powerful magical talents, he truly has no control over it. However, when these children were making fun of Lin, a KN made his debut and warned this brat. Grinning, RMC turned to face the knight. He gave him the order to lay down his weapon, but these children had an opportunity to flee when the knight pursued it. However, he continued to say that those children ought to get harsh punishment for what they had done. Lin then explained to the knight that he was not supposed to use his sword on regular people. Mr. Carl the knight was surprised to hear it. Then he gave Lin an instant apology. He then revealed to Lin the main reason she had come to see him, stating that Lin had received a letter from a guy going by the name of Mr. Oliver. RMC remembered the man from his past. It appears that Lin was hidden by Mr. Oliver at the time of the tragedy that claimed his parents. To put it briefly, the elderly guy was his benefactor. He also knew that Lin was completely incapable of using magic, so he had been assisting him ever since. Lin returned to their mansion after that. This man, Lane Lancer, Lin's mother's elder brother, greeted him. Lin called his uncle, Dad, because they were keeping Lin hidden from something. They moved to the study area and opened Mr. Oliver's letter there. Mr. Blaine enchanted this paper pigeon with his magic. Glow began to emanate from the bird's magic crystal. Then the paper bird began to speak. Mr. Oliver, the elderly mage, told them that he had discovered an odd book that might be able to aid Lin in reawakening his power. When the paper bird fluttered its wings, an ancient book materialized. When it got close to Lin, he saw right away that the book in question was even composed of animal bones. As soon as he had it, he thought back to all the times he had attempted to study magic. Now he's wondering if he could pull it off this time. When Mr. Blaine noticed Lin's unhappiness, he made an effort to comfort him. He informed Lin that they weren't really interested in becoming mages, much less sage-level magician, and that he didn't really need to push himself to study magic right now. Mr. Blaine concluded by saying that Lin may always decide to lead a life identical to his own. It turns out that Lin's father abandoned him, and since then, he has been responsible for learning more about it by developing into a level-headed mage. However, Lin suspected that something had occurred since his father loved him so much and could not have abandoned him in such a manner. When RMC thanked his uncle for his warm remarks, he replied that he was aware that his father's treachery was more complicated than that. He reasoned that his father may still be alive, and that he might only be imprisoned in the domain of an unidentified dragon. Lin grinned and informed his uncle that he couldn't just disregard that possibility just yet, since he was a son. Later that evening, as Lin lay in bed and gazed at this amazing book, he realized that his uncle was acting only in his best interests. But his look became more resolute as he considered that he shouldn't give up as long as there was a possibility of finding his father. Then he recalled something from his early years. Although his father wasn't always at home, he always made sure to have something nice for Lin and his mother when he returned. RMC had consistently imagined themselves to be the ideal family. Up until the day his mother inquired as to his father's impending departure. In response, Lin's father, Zoe, turned to face his spouse and stated. However, he promised them before departing that this would be his final expedition provided all went according to plan. The last thing Lin recalled was that they were meant to live like this forever. However, his mother vanished and his father never returned at the same time. Lin found herself by herself. And learning magic would give him the ability to solve this riddle, which would be the only way to mend the rift in his family. And now he's hoping that this book will enable him to fulfill his mission. Lin said that all of the learning techniques documented in this book came from traditional magic. However, deciding that he had nothing to lose, he sat down and tried learning magic once more. When RMC began to meditate, a blue aura began to envelop him. These began to assemble around him when they were still little, and as they grew, they took on the shape of these magical particles. But he was not aware of it since his eyes were closed. Lin broke the wall next to him out of frustration, believing he had failed once more. However, he became aware of the magic particles around him after a short while. It was at this point that he realized he could at last sense magic power. This made Lin pleased and gave him hope. But before he could even rejoice, a tremendous pressure felt on his body. He began to cough up blood because there were just too many magic particles entering his body. He believes he is going to die, but he knows he can't allow this to continue. If this continues, he is certain he will blow up right now. Knowing that he would not have the opportunity to search for his family if he passed away in this manner, Lin summoned all of his might to bear the suffering. As RMC let out one final cry, a vivid blue aura engulfed him. And then everything turned dark, leaving him perplexed as to what had transpired. All of the mystical force that was hurtling at his body vanished. In addition, he was perplexed as to why the lights were out. Considering how weird the sight was, he made the decision to venture outside and investigate. Duty believed he was still in his room. However, as he was considering how to escape this situation, he felt something in his hands. Lin reached out and picked up a crimson egg. Then a notification box appeared, frightening Lin to no end, as the terrifying status window welcomed RMC. He withdrew as the system presented itself, saying that it would act as his butler, and that it had been waiting for him in this terrible location for more than 10 years. It also informed Lin that this holy thief was his. And the name of this location was Dragon Ranch. After that, Lin was taken to a tiny island that was encircled by water, and so small that he wouldn't even be able to walk around it. As he began to take in the facts, particularly the name of the island, the first thing that sprang to mind were the terrifying fire-breathing dragons. The computer responded to Lin's fearful question about the whereabouts of the dragons by telling him that the egg in front of him was a dragon. The butler also told him that before he could ever return to his realm, he had to nurture this red egg, which will be his first dragon. Lin became enraged since he realized he couldn't grow this dragon, and was afraid it would devour him immediately. And shortly after, the egg began to split open, revealing a little red foot. This scene attracted the attention of RMC. The butler also warned Lin that if he doesn't immediately splatter some blood on it, it will truly consume him. This type of caution ought to have been given from the beginning. The egg was beginning to glow brighter as time was passing quickly. Lin admitted that he still didn't know what was going on, but that he had no option but to bite his thumb out of instinct. The creature was on the verge of hatching, and RMC questioned whether it was truly essential to go through this procedure in order to establish a link with it. He reached up and touched the thing that had the potential to wipe out the entire universe at the last possible minute. Following this, a frantic red light beam emerged from the egg. Its strength caused RMC to lift his arms and defend himself. And Lin gradually opened his eyes to observe what had happened when the gust subsided. Butler then told Lin that the red baby dragon had successfully imprinted and had fully hatched. However, Lin's attitude was skeptical since he still finds it hard to believe that this small man would grow up to be the most dangerous monster on the planet. The young dragon knocked against Lin's knees since its eyes were still covered in shell. As he labeled the infant dragon as a little whelp, this person sighed, realizing that there was nothing to be scared of. Lin reached out to assist this tiny one in removing the last of the shell off its head, revealing this adorable newborn dragon's entire look. However, this adorable moment was cut short when the little dragon lost it because a tiny human had touched him. The little, unattractive dragon then sprang powerfully toward RMC. Lin saw that this monster appeared to be able to understand dragon language at the same instant as he established that it was, in fact, a terrible dragon. After a series of notifications appeared, Lin realized that he was actually playing Dragon City in real life. He received 50 gold and 5 experience points for owning his first dragon, and he also received an additional 1,000 gold. This gold can be used for field construction and expansion, as well as purchasing food for the dragon. The system gold was also equivalent to real money, with a 1:1 exchange rate. RMC grinned at the thought of using real money. A new task appeared, asking Lin to create a fire habitat for this small dragon. It amazes him that he actually needs to construct a house here. The small dragon continued to complain as it navigated the system, saying that it wouldn't even be happy to have a human offer it a home. However, Lin decided to overlook it since, given the quantity of beginning gold he got, he believed the 100 gold fire habitat to be still rather inexpensive. After he purchased it, a red blueprint with the location of the aforementioned fire habitat emerged, and he set it up next to his little island. And as soon as it was constructed, he received an additional 5 experience points and 50 gold. He may get up to 500 gold per day with this fire habitat hat, which also enables the fire dragon to advance 1 level every day. Charmander was ecstatic. This little dragon stopped complaining. RMC remembered how this small one had stated that it wouldn't want a home, and it entered the lava right away and swam on it. Ling gave it the name Ya, because he saw that the young dragon kept repeating, Ya, Ya, and he heard a snoring as he was gazing at it. Ya was fast asleep. She is a very simple-minded creature. RMC also made advantage of the opportunity to finish more routine chores, like as creating a farm with dragon scale fruit, which is one of the preferred foods of the dragon race, and will accelerate their growth by 10%. Lin was permitted to leave the ranch because he had already finished the instruction. With a quick flip of his fingers, he said, "Exit," and Lin was gradually brought back to his reality. His body collapsed once again. This man gently opened his eyes to his bed. To his surprise, he looked over and saw 3 people standing next to him. These 3 were there, and they appeared concerned. Lin questioned their reason for being in his room. Their revelation that they had witnessed Lin flying up into the ceiling surprised RMC, who thought that was a completely ludicrous notion. However, these 2 indicated the ceiling to demonstrate it, and a huge fracture appeared. When Mr. Carl and this unidentified child began to dance and celebrate, RMC was perplexed as to why they were content. The brat then attempted to clarify what had transpired. However, he struggles to find the perfect words. While Lin was unconscious, Mr. Blaine assisted him and informed him that he had discharged a highly potent magical force. That clarified the reason for their extreme happiness. RMC attempted gathering magic particles once again, since he was taken aback by this revelation and couldn't believe it. And to his amazement, he was able to accomplish it. Lin surmised that this was possible because of the book Mr. Oliver had given him. The only odd thing that remained was how, after awakening his magic, he was sent to an odd location. Lin interrupted these two when they were enjoying themselves. He requested that Mr. Carl adhere to the guidelines in this book about the cultivation of our. MC was curious whether it would have the same impact on others as it had on him. However, Mr. Carl showed no emotion at all. Mr. Blaine, Lin's uncle, was unaware about the ranch. Lin then realized that he was the only one permitted to find this location. Additionally, the mechanism prevents him from telling anybody about it every time. Lin attempted and persisted in cultivating, but despite this, his body is still unable to withstand magic, and he persistently coughs up blood. After that, the system informed Lin that since Yi was still not at level 1, he could not use magic, and that his magic level would be proportionate to the level of his dragon. He finally learned something that helped to explain why his body would explode if he tried to absorb more magic power. Following that event, Lin made an effort to avoid returning to the Dragon Ranch. However, as soon as these alerts began to appear, the butler interrupted his day to tell him that Yi's food supply was running low and its health was beginning to deteriorate. Additionally, the butler has begun to gaslight him for being a really responsible rancher. This tactic worked well, since the guilt was beginning to mount. Mr. Blaine asked Lin what was wrong after noticing something was off while they were eating. Lin then gave an explanation, saying he had just been hungry. After hearing that, the man advised him to look after his body, especially since he could now utilize magic. Lin praised him for his thoughtfulness. The butler was the only person unhappy, since it continued to bother our MC. In order to help Lin hone his magic abilities, his uncle also made it possible for Mr. Oliver to invite him to study at the Holy Iris Academy. When Lin learned about that location, she was shocked. The greatest magic academy in the Empire was Holy Iris Academy. Zoe was praised as one of the most gifted students at the academy, where Mr. Oliver served as Dean Associate and Lin's father had graduated. And at this point, the man was fantasizing content that he could go there as well. But when he saw several warning indicators, Lin realized how urgent it was this time. The butler revealed that Yi's health was in critical condition, below 10, and that Lin would have to transform into a dragon egg in order to make up for her loss if Yi passed away. Lin became anxious since he had no idea that the butler actually possessed this crucial knowledge at the last minute. Following that, RMC began feeding Yaya every day as her hunger was simply too great. It has taken quite nearly all of his day to complete this operation. This little dragon has been eating and resting properly, and after some time, it reached level 1. With the threat of losing Tiny Yaw now averted, Lin grinned and attempted to pet it once again. Yaya, however, took offense at this gesture and smacked its master's hand since it didn't want his head to be painted. Lin persisted in saying this, teasing Yaya that this guy could still pull it off because the dragon was still too little. The butler then informed Lin that he was already becoming a skilled rancher, to which Lin replied that the butler was getting very annoying. However, this argument that Lin wouldn't have been able to discern magic if it weren't for it didn't truly concern the butler. Lin learned about this for the first time through this. Butler verified it and disclosed that it may possibly grant Lin greater authority. This information piqued the interest of RMC. After that, a notification window tells Lin that Ya has opened the magic training chamber, and that Lin's body is being drawn into the magic circle that has materialized in front of him since he reached level 1. He was standing on this meditation balance board the next thing he knew. RMC attempted to inquire with the butler about further details on the aforementioned training, but it continued to count down. Then it became clear that Lin had to maintain his equilibrium for a set period of time to avoid having a 40-ton hammer strike at him. And Lin sank, as was to be predicted, and tasted this enormous as hammer. Additionally, the board shook his feet against its body, exacerbating the damage. This will stop Lin from trying to avoid this instruction. The hammer of retribution would not stop swinging, and he would never be able to get off the balancing board. All Lin could do was pray, and he pondered if this was indeed training or a shortcut to heaven. It was also revealed that he would not be able to adequately meditate. It just took a little prayer for him to lose focus once more. And with that, his face was shattered by an 80-ton wrecking ball. Lin was forced to repeatedly go through this terrible training. This guy eventually succeeded in making the training more challenging to the point where he appeared to be standing on a tower of balance boards. After several sledgehammers and some time spent learning meditation, our MC was now beginning to understand the benefits of it. The butler congratulated him on finishing the training. Lin's face was already twisted from the abuse he had endured, yet he still managed to grin. He spent 7 days doing this type of training. With a large smile on his face, he believed he might attempt something now that he had been exercising so hard. When Lin lifted his hand and flicked his fingers, Chad's magic sensing ability was triggered. When Lin directed his energy toward his palm, the magic circle did actually materialize. And then something happened. He let go of a little fart ball. There wasn't quite as much magic as there should have been, which disappointed our MC. Then, realizing that it was humiliating, he chose to extinguish the fire while no one was looking. When Lin started flying the final time, he was with Mr. Carl and Mr. Blaine, and until he saw this child, both of them were in shock. His name was Jack. This person raced back to the mansion in a hurry to inform his superior that fire magic had been employed. Embarrassed by his little fireball, Lin attempted to stop him. By accident, another fireball was released, and this time it almost touched Jack. When Lin realized that his fire magic had grown more potent, the butler informed him that the rancher's skill level had an impact on magic strength. Wearing a diabolical look, he chose to give it another go on Jack. Jack was running for his life, and Lin was after him. Mr. Blaine received the acceptance letter the same day. His uncle then informed Lin of this information right away from the Sacred Iris Academy. Our MC expressed satisfaction. Following some preparations, Lin was prepared to go for the academy, and the people in their town bid him farewell. He is currently officially embarking on his wizard journey. The majority of people were shocked to learn that the man who had been confined to preschool was now destined to become a true mage. Jack drove them towards the academy, knowing that this trip would take at least a month. And Lin utilized that nighttime to train in the same technique of meditation, but with beehives, the level of difficulty was significantly increasing. Lin was too preoccupied with his training to notice that Ya had already matured into a huge Charmander that is now a Charizard. Ya reached level 3 and picked up some new abilities. Because Ya designated his master as its target and asked for a larger habitat, his fire breath was likewise more potent. Lin consented, but he wanted the dragon to accompany him and see the outside world before he gave it to Ya. When Ya heard this request, which she hadn't anticipated, she got perplexed. Following this, Lin and Ya were returned to his world. They both disappeared from Dragon Ranch. Right now, this man, possessing a black dragon, sensed Ya's presence and is perplexed as to why a dragon exists beyond the Rift Valley. In a matter of moments, the dragon had entered the actual world. Then Ya's eyes opened. As it began to survey its surroundings, Ya saw that this location was obviously larger than the ranch. The fire dragon was ecstatic to learn new things, and was now happy that the human world was YY approved. Lin then recommended that they take a plane ride. He decided to make the most of the system, as he can't truly get rid of it, while he was developing a close relationship with Yi. Lin made the decision to train his dragons in order to become a stronger mage, and things were beginning to go his way. He intended to keep going till he cleared his father's name. However, at this particular moment, then cut short by an arrow that almost struck them. Lin pondered whether dragon hunters were there in the vicinity. These two were looking about when they discovered that there were individuals screaming out for aid in one area of the woodland that was on fire. Later, Lin and Yi discovered that there was a robbery going on, and that the disturbance was the source of the arrow that almost struck them. Then, someone close to the flame said, "Young master," and it sounded remarkably familiar. At that moment, RMC called out Tiny Jack's name. It turns out that this small man was captured during the theft and was kept hostage together with these two soldiers. Poisonous snakes were also around them. Then little Jack remembered how he ended up in this predicament. Lin had dropped a significant amount of weight, and his young master saw that she had been absorbed in her magical practice. Keeping that in mind, he headed into the woods to get Lin some food. He saw the caravan that was traveling by and stopped for a short while to relax. However, that was also the moment when a surprising gang of men emerged behind him. All of the guys defending the caravan were vanquished. The leader put pressure on Lucas, the merchant who hired all the men, to reveal the location of the hidden goods they were delivering, and Lucas was caught as well. If Lucas didn't inform them of the specified location, one by one, the troops will be bitten by the snakes. The fact that even a tiny bite would convert these creatures into desiccated carcasses made it the most deadly portion. The fact that a soldier had already died caused this person to display this frightened look. He attempted to beg the robber's commander, but it was ineffective. He also had no other option, because losing the valuables would damage their image and bring about their demise. After learning that the commander was wearing this menacing look, Lucas then decided not to notify his soldiers, so he gave the order to carry out the executions. Little Jack was the snake's next target. In his mind, this man even expressed regret to Lin because he was about to part ways with him on his adventure. The snake was going to bite him when it opened its jaws. But a flame struck them before it could do its task. That was a well-timed strike. The rope that held Jack and the snakes were both set on fire. The young child collapsed on the ground as the robbers struggled to comprehend what had occurred. Subsequently, a figure appeared out of nowhere and trod on the man's face. Naturally, it was Lin Lanster. After mastering the superhero landing, he even said that the thief had some flexibility. The other robbers looked up their brother's status. Little Jack, meantime, was ecstatic to see his master. Lin then suggested that he take a step back. As of right now, their larger issue is that there are simply too many of these crooks. However, a few of them became frightened when Lin unleashed the fireball. They believed Lin to be at least a third-level mage. Their commander was the only one who remained fearless. Then their commander gave them the assurance that they had nothing to fear. And that was as a result of his third-ranking knight status. The leader, assured of his speed, charged forward, believing that a magician would truly be at a disadvantage as Lin would still have to chant. Then, a strong slash was aimed at RMC, but he was fortunate to avoid it. Lin observed that the strike was simply too strong for EV to split a massive boulder in half. He attempted to dodge all of the more slashes that came in, but he couldn't afford for these men to find the dragon. He also believed that YY was the one who launched the fireball, so he sent Ya back to the ranch. RMC eventually became overwhelmed by the disparity in pace. He's running out of time to avoid this one. He was attacked, and it was a direct blow. Lin stood up, but the damage was obvious. He realized he could no longer merely duck. The training room had given him a lot more agility and mental toughness, but this was insufficient. He had to fight back. Lifting his palm, he began chanting his magic. But this allowed the leader to strike him once again. He was propelled toward the tree's trunk by that strike. Lin collapsed on the ground, face down. The robber's commander began making fun of Lin. He informed RMC that despite having the same rank as a knight and mage, a little child had no chance of defeating him. Lin was flung toward a massive boulder by the leader. However, despite all of these assaults, Lin remained aware. He attempted to recover his breath, feeling that the chanting was somewhat bothersome. The butler then sent a notice, indicating that it had discovered its master was fighting for the first time. It was discovered that Lin could equal the dragon's magic, meaning that RMC would be able to employ all of Ya's present abilities, including the shield claw bite and the quick fireball talent. Butler questioned him about importing all of these abilities. Then he remembered that fireball from the instant was the same one with Ya. Lin's jaw dropped wide in shock at the thought that he might be able to utilize dragon power. Other than the fact that he could utilize more different kinds of magic the more dragons he had, the butler attested to his ability to actually use these spells. Lin grins demonic as he clicks the import button, and the commander gave him another kick to the face while he was preoccupied with lowering himself. This person was getting too self-assured, and he made fun of Lin because he believed he was out of bounds. The commander then brandished his sword, saying he'd had enough playing with this child, and that he was going to put an end to this battle once and for all. Lin was going to take a cut. However, he later succeeded in turning on the sync system. After that, he pivoted and cast the instantaneous fireball spell. It seems that spell was a fire dragon. The robber's commander was forced to retreat, and his followers were astounded to see that Lin's magic had even melted their blade. And now that the roles have reversed, Lin may do less chant magic, which was the one drawback of the Megas. With a grin, RMC spoke to the panty-loving thief. Lin questioned the leader, wearing a mischievous look, if he could still win this battle, given that the leader's sword had melted and RMC could now do instant magic. These guys rapidly developed a different perspective on RMC. It's as like they fell in love with Lin's strength overnight. However, Lin also had enough and immediately blew them off. After, the caravan's commander Lucas went up to Lin and dressed his wounds. RMC thanked Lucas. However, this man stated that he was only repaying Lin's kindness, and that the caravan would have perished without her intervention. When RMC realized this, he felt perplexed and pondered what type of cargo they were carrying that would be more crucial than the troops' lives. Then Lucas led Lin to a large, enigmatic object that was even shrouded in a blanket. Although it's not as valuable as the products, Lucas said that it's still a lovely item, and he was happy to present it to Lin as a thank you. Then he lifted the curtain, revealing this plump maiden with rope-tied hands. These physical characteristics let Lin recognize her identity right away. He questioned how some of the legends that this species had been exterminated long ago due to dragons wreaking havoc still persisted. This particular life type bears the most resemblance to humans. The woman who was imprisoned was undoubtedly an elf. Lucas laughed like a crazy person and even declared that a guy could never be seduced by her. However, Lin didn't see it that way and was now enraged. Then, Lucas advised Lin to stop holding back since he would soon have this and could do whatever with it. He even gave him the exact moment they received this. He described how they discovered her in the midst of a combat zone. Mercenaries attempted to murder one another in order to obtain her. Lucas also mentioned to Lin the possibility of this elf fetching 1,000,000 gold coins. He then took advantage of the occasion to invite Lin to join their team. He was aware that RMC's strength would be useful to them, and in order to expand his business, this merchant plans to employ additional strong guys. And our MC's ability to do instant magic piqued his curiosity the most. Lin exhaled deeply. He thanked Lucas as he carefully walked up to the cage. Then he grasped the metal, and flames began to emanate from his fingers. Lin just started a fire in the cage. The fire's heat was more than sufficient to burn the rope and release the elf. This move surprised Lucas, so he asked Lin what he was doing. However, this person just kept ignoring him and gradually destroyed the prison. Because this man viewed life as a commodity, RMC was infuriated. Even though Lucas was already terrified of Lin, he attempted to reason his way out of this. Lin then sent Lucas a little fireball, as a warning not to do anything goofy. At that point, this cowardly merchant began to flee for his life. The guards accompanying Lucas began to flee as well, making no attempt to resist Lin. Regarding Lin, he extended his hand to the elf, whose fingers appeared to be preparing to take action. However, she is still terrified and unsure of what to do. The elf informed RMC she didn't have to be terrified of him, but he only gazed at her. With a smile, Lin declared that he was coming to release her. The elf blushed since it was the first time she had heard such sweet comments from a human. Lin eventually won her trust and inquired as to if the flames had caused any harm to her. The elf then expressed her gratitude to him for saving her from those men while wearing a bashful expression. Our youngster requested the elf's name after introducing himself and beaming at her risibilities. But Lin's valor just captured the attention of this elf. She then covered her face out of embarrassment. Lin informed her that she didn't have to respond to it if she didn't want to because of the unpleasant environment that surrounded these two. He then bid her farewell and told her to get out as quickly as possible in order to avoid being caught by someone else. So the elf plucked up the confidence to say something. Nike was called out by the elf before Lin could even flee. Nike said she was concerned about something. She put her arms around our son and confided in him about her thoughts. It seems that the elf was afraid that Lin would chase her away if she mentioned her name. They then returned to the carriage, where Jack was preparing their meal. This elf lady didn't stop herself from devouring nearly all of their supper since she was so hungry. She ought to slow down before she chokes on everything, our MC said. However, Lin didn't care because he was glad he could assist Nike. Nike was then questioned by him about why she stayed with them when she had the opportunity to return to her clan. The carefree look she had lost. Something from her history came to mind. Nike bent her head and informed Lin she was not welcome to return. She used to be so lively that she got lost in the jungle at one point. And by the time she returned home, the adventurers had already discovered their hideout, and her tribe had left. She was heartbroken to see all of these, but she forced herself to hold back her emotions since she couldn't afford to get caught too. After hearing a faint voice nearby, one of the guards went in search of some escapas. At that point, they noticed the plants that Nike had collected. She tried her hardest to go as quickly as she could, but there was a rope that was meant to serve as a trap for anyone trying to flee. Nike faltered. When she glanced over her shoulder, her countenance became gloomy. She is aware of what will occur to her should she be discovered. But despite everything, the guards were able to apprehend her. She even made several attempts to escape, but she was never successful. Lin labeled the troops a bunch of slime, knowing full well the agony this caused her. Nike was taken aback by Lin's response, believing the comment was directed for her. After apologizing promptly, RMC questioned Nike about why, despite the fact that he is also a human, she did not fear him. The elf merely looked at him, considering her motive. She thought back to Lin's rescue of her from those merchant thugs. She retorted that her sponsor was unique. After all, he was her rescuer. Lin reddened a little at this. Then, RMC allowed her to stay with him while they looked for clues concerning her clan's location. He promised to send her back as soon as they had further information. Additionally, Lin disclosed to her the reason for his journey, which was to attend a school to learn magic. Then, in an effort to allay any concerns, he asked Nike if she might pose as his maid. Nike's face instantly transformed upon hearing the request. She even attempted to hide her body, but Lin freaked out since he didn't want to give her the incorrect impression. He clarified that calling him young master was all that was required of her, nothing more or less. Nike has been more composed after learning about Lin's motivation. Nike grinned and followed Lin since she thought Lin's gesture was too adorable. She also began referring to him as Little Master. RMC exhaled in relief that everything had gone smoothly. Then, realizing he was going to bed Jack, Lin made the decision to leave her alone herself. This tiny whelp was perplexed as to why his master had exited the carriage, believing that he was going to have an affair with the elf lady and therefore lose his virginity. Lin was taken aback by the comment. After 3 days, Jack notified his master that they had arrived at the Hallowed Iris Academy. When RMC stepped out of the carriage, he was eager to speak with Mr. Oliver because he would be able to tell him more about the enigmatic dragon book that Lin had received from the elderly guy. And the butler showed him a notification when he was deep in contemplation. It appears that the system recognized the arrival of its master at Holy Iris Academy. It thus suggested that he investigate the academy in order to find clues that would enable him to unleash the next dragon, which is the water dragon. His expression darkened as he realized that Lin was about to encounter more dragons. The butler then informed him that the more dragons he had, the stronger he would get. It also displayed Lin's current rancher status. He started as a first-rank mage and has only encountered 1 dragon thus far. It also disclosed that he would be able to study further forms of magic, which are divided into 6 categories: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and dark. This is provided he completed all the chores the system required of him. Lin would acquire all of the affinities for these magical qualities if he could collect all of these dragon eggs. He was aware that mastering them all would make it simpler for him to reach the sage level of mage. RMC was more motivated by this and rushed into the academy. But first, before that, he bid farewell to Jack and Nike, who both wished their young master well. Lin observed several unique things as soon as he entered the academy, such as this package delivery guy who rode a broomstick. Pupils who were enthusiastic in learning. He grinned, realizing that this was exactly the same situation. He assumed there would be a magic academy. And as he was surveying his surroundings, he noticed someone. This guy met him and told Lin that while RMC had been personally recommended by the dean, Mr. Oliver would still need to take the entrance test because he was on a business trip and wouldn't be available for a time. People in this room were conversing in the meantime, and they anticipated that the student Mr. Oliver had admitted was at least a mid-level. When Lin finally showed up in the entrance exam room, his very presence was enough to astound these guys. He was welcomed by a professor who informed him that he would be administering the test. Lin informed the professor he was prepared. Lin's confidence was appreciated by the professor, who subsequently gave him the go-ahead to touch the blue orb. However, when he began to consider the property, he became concerned that someone would discover his secret. Then the system informed Lin that the magic crystal does not detect the ranch. It simply assesses magic skill. Lin pleaded for forgiveness for the delay as the professor attempted to attract his attention once more. Our MC touched the crystal with his hand. Because his father was a magic genius, he assumed that his magic talent would be high enough. The crystal shook and displayed a vivid red hue. The lecturer believed that Lin had a supreme degree of magic talent, in addition to the fact that Mr. Oliver had personally suggested that Lin study here. This professor was beginning to lose his mind. He believed he had found a genius. However, the crystal revealed after the test that Lin merely had a weak fire affinity and a poor magic skill. Everyone in the room was a little let down, because this wasn't what our MC had anticipated, so he questioned how it could possibly be possible. Then the system told Lin that his magic awakening was unique from everyone else's, since his dragon's magic levels limited his skill. Therefore, all he had to do was raise Yia's level. People began to murmur around him, casting doubt on his abilities. The professor advised Lin to return tomorrow to report, telling RMC that there was nothing they could do but accept this man because Mr. Oliver was the one who had nominated him. However, before his humiliation ended, Lin was approached by someone. A job was assigned to Lin by this Augustine, who also happens to be the president of the Truth Student Union. If Lin could defeat Augustine in a mage trial, he would get a piece of the water dragon egg. Lin believed that this man was among the most capable pupils present, and that the first target would not be simple. With a look of hatred on his face, Augustine walked up to Lin and urged him to turn up his uniform and badge immediately. This person doesn't think Lin should have been admitted to the academy in the first place. Lin then recalled the instances in which the other kids had mistreated and undervalued him. Our MC was simply fed up with being viewed as an outsider and a slime. In response, he said that Augustine sounded more like a thug from a seedy alley than a president. Additionally, Lin informed him that Augustine was the one who, by intimidating a fellow student, damaged this academy's image. Augustine fell mute as a result, but his lack spoke up first. Lin was only supporting himself, too. He had to get over it. Honestly, this was not the time to stir up any issue. He then made the decision to get up and leave the room, since he realized he had no chance of defeating this man at his present skill level. He must become more resilient and can no longer rely entirely on the system. Lin returned to the Dragon Ranch after that occurrence, and the dragon fruits were also ready. However, there is one issue. Yia has grown so much that it has need a larger environment. Lin received a fireball directly in the face after failing to keep his previous commitment. When Lin told the dragon that he still needed 2 more days to earn more money and pay for the improvement, he made every effort to comfort Yia. But since Lin had told him the same thing 2 days prior, Yia had had enough. Then, RMC attempted to feed him despite. While RMC believed that YY was starting to act more and more like a child, poor YY now believed that Lin was simply lying to it. After that, he began to consider how to improve Yia's larger habitat. However, the little habitat could only yield 500 gold every day, and the renovation would cost 10,000 gold. As he realized this, he nearly gave up. But after that, he stood back up and reasoned that he could work odd jobs or anything else to get more gold. As he was getting ready, he believed that being a parent was an extremely challenging job. A voice said that the dinner was ready a few seconds later. After then, Lin opened the door. His gaze was full of adoration. And when he glanced at her, Nike's designed attire caused flowers to appear in his viewpoint. Nike questioned her instructor if there was anything weird about it since she felt uneasy. RMC assured her that everything about her appearance was okay. In addition, Lin expressed her regret to Nike, telling him that she had to temporarily assume the role of his maid. He informed her that if it weren't for the Academy's regulations, he would have given her more exquisite gowns that would have fit her better. That elf blushed with that sentence. Nike said she didn't find it bothersome at all, and gave her master a hug. The fact that our kid could smell the crisp, clean aroma of the forest made him appreciate the gesture. Following that, Lin prepared to attend the academy. His performance in yesterday's admittance exam made him extremely well known inside the institution. Additionally, this caused several others in his immediate vicinity to start acting rudely. Lin attended his first lesson after receiving his official schedule. As soon as he walked inside the room, someone stopped him. It was this woman. Her name is Isha, and she was given this class to teach. She chastised Lin, telling him that he couldn't just walk in the academy using his connection. Even yet, she informed him that Lin would not be permitted to attend her class. Even the pupils in this classroom began making fun of Lin. Then, our MC requested assistance from the system to evaluate the other students' magic talents. These were his classmates. The most of them were merely first graders, and there was even a dog present. When Lin realized that none of them appeared to be superior to him, he grinned. Additionally, he inquired about the subject of his teacher's lesson before leaving. Lin went on to say that he was prepared to show her that he could outwit every kid in this room in order to establish his worth. He hopes to be admitted back into the class if he can do that. Even a dog had this arrogant expression, and the kids began to laugh and make fun of Lin once more. However, this instructor urged them to be silent. Lin's proposition caught her attention, and she granted her a week to be ready for her magic potion class. Instructor Isha informed Lin that in order for her to admit him into her class, he needed to receive the top spot on the exam. If not, nevertheless, he must leave this academy. This little wager became more significant than anticipated. It was unexpected by RMC that his future in the academy would also be in jeopardy. Using this menacing look, Professor Isha asked him if he was up for the task. Then the system generated a new work for Lin to complete, matching the requirements that Teacher Isha had given him. If Lin succeeds in completing this task, he would be rewarded with a piece of the water dragon egg. Since the system turned it into a chore, Lin reasoned that it is not insurmountable. And now that the challenge has been accepted,